Okay, we're connected.
Okay. Good morning. I'm Cynthia Schendel, and I serve as co-chair of the Social Work Advisory Committee of the Kansas Behavioral Sciences Regulatory Board. I ask the members of the advisory committee to respond to a roll call to signify their presence at this open meeting that is being conducted remotely by conference call and other electronic medium. Andrea Perdomo Morales.
Present.
Donna Honer-Quayle. Sarah Behrens. Mary Gill. Mike Gillette. Mike,
Present.
thank you. Leanne Gingery.
Present.
Angie Heller-Workman. Janie Holzrichter.
Present.
Catherine Reck, sorry. Eric Schonecker.
Present.
Hi, Eric. Kristen Stice. Oh, she's not with us anymore. Sorry. Robin Unruh.
Present.
Thank you. I note the following BSRB staff members are also present: David Fye and Leslie Allen.
Hello.
Next, David Fye will read a message concerning this meeting being held remotely.
This is David Fye, Executive Director for the Behavioral Sciences Regulatory Board. Public comment allows the public to address the advisory committee about its concerns, but the Kansas Open Meeting Act, or COMA, does not require the advisory committee to provide public comment or answer questions from individuals. Individuals requesting to provide public comment could contact the executive director prior to the meeting by sending an email to david.fye@ks.gov. There will be no public comment at this meeting as no individuals requested to provide public comment. Because we are conducting this meeting publicly, remotely, by conference call and other teleconference ability, state for the record the following information. Public access to this meeting is being conducted by medium of interactive communication that allows members of the public without cost to attend the meeting through the use of the conference call and on the board's YouTube channel. But while the meeting is conducted remotely, the requirements of the COMA are not suspended, so we will be conducting this meeting pursuant to the COMA. On February 16th, 2024, we sent notice of the advisory committee meeting to all individuals who had requested notice of such meetings. The notice was also posted on the board's website, ksbsrb.ks.gov. You may obtain a copy of the notice at that website. An agenda and other meeting material have been posted on the board's website and are available for review. You may also request a copy of the agenda specifically by sending an email to david.fye@ks.gov with the subject line request for the agenda, and it will be sent to you. The notice contains information for the conference call and YouTube channel that allows members of the public to attend the meeting free of charge. The notice also states that if we have any technical issues during the meeting, you may call the board office at 785-296-3240 or send an email to bsrb@ks.gov. A recording of this meeting will be available on the BSRB YouTube channel following the conclusion of the meeting by using the link to the meeting on the agenda. And I did check the conference call line before we began. There is no one currently on the conference call line, but if that changes, I will let you know.
Okay, thank you, David. Our first order of business, or next order of business, is approval of the agenda. Did everyone get a copy of that in your email? Anyone have any additions? Or do I have a motion to approve the agenda as written?
This is Leanne. I motion to approve the agenda as written.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
I'll support that.
Thank you,
I
Mike.
support that.
All in favor? Aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay. Agenda is approved. Next up is approval of the minutes from our last meeting, which was on February 13th. You had a chance to look those over. Those were also attached to your email from David. We note the correction of the spelling of Mike's name. Add a T at the end in future. Any other corrections? Or if not, do I hear a motion to approve the minutes as written?
This is Leanne. I motion to approve the minutes as written.
Thank you. And do I have a second for that motion?
Second.
Oh, thank you, Andrea. All in favor? Aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion passes and the minutes are approved. Next, we will have the executive director's report. Take it away, David.
All right, thank you, Cynthia. Let's start with some agency operations. The BSRB is preparing for some upcoming graduations for a lot of students. So we know that's an exciting time, and we're really excited about those individuals completing one step and moving towards a professional career. So Leslie and I have been making appointments with different student groups at different schools and either visiting those students remotely or sometimes when we are able to do so in person. And we've been providing information on the licensure process, trying to answer a lot of their questions ahead of time so that goes as smoothly as possible, providing information about the disciplinary process and the expectations about unprofessional conduct that they would have as an applicant or a licensee under the board, and just trying to clarify some of that role as well. And we also provide some information about resources on the BSRB website and ways that they can get connected and kind of be part of these discussions ahead of time. So those have been going really positively. We've been able to visit a lot more schools this spring than we have in the past. And we're looking forward to setting up visits with even more schools in the future. In terms of another sort of an outreach type item we had recently, I was invited to present to a group of individuals on the Governor's Behavioral Health Center for Excellence. This is a group based in Wichita, and it involves a lot of employers, mental health providers. And I was able to provide them some updates on items the board and the BSRB have worked on in terms of sort of modernizing their licensure requirements, updating certain things, and some of the board's ongoing discussion in terms of looking at the regulations, looking to see, some of the changes involving telehealth and supervision and different things like that. And that presentation was scheduled to go about half an hour. Because of the questions, it actually went about 45 minutes and a lot of positive feedback. And they wanted me to communicate that they really appreciate the efforts of the board to really take a look at making some of these things more open and keeping in mind the workforce challenges. And so they really wanted to communicate that positive feedback back to the board. So happy to share that with you all as well. Another item in terms of operations, we've mentioned a little bit that the BSRB is making positive changes. One of the positive changes we're going to be making here in the next month or so is that we're going to be moving to a new website. The BSRB currently has an agreement with a state vendor for our website, and there is a company called Granicus that has partnered with the state. And so a lot of the state agency websites are moving under Granicus, and we will expect the BSRB website probably about the first week in May to transition to that new agreement with Granicus. For most people, the functionality shouldn't change. All of our forms will still be available on the website. The same information should be up there, but the front page will probably look a little bit different. However, it should be more accessible for individuals, especially from a mobile perspective. So we're looking forward to making some positive changes with that movement for the website. The big important takeaway for that too is that the website for the BSRB will not be changing. So we will still have the same website. So like I said, for most people, it should just be a difference of appearance. They should have all the same functionality once we roll that over, but we're looking at probably the first week in May for that transition. Moving to some legislative updates, I thought I'd go ahead and talk about some of the legislation first that has passed recently that has some relevance to the members of the committee. The one item in particular I wanted to highlight was the passage of House Bill 2484. That was the Social Work Multi-State Compact Bill that has now passed the House. It has passed the Senate. It has been sent to the governor, and it is waiting approval. Now, some of you have been tracking the work on that bill. The BSRB was asked to be a proponent of the bill, and the board considered that, heard information, and decided to support the compact. And we have been one of the biggest proponents of the multi-state compact as it's been going through the process. Now, we did say that, this is a big compact. It will change our licensure pretty significantly. Well, this is one of only two multi-state compacts out of all the health professions that deals with creating a new multi-state license. And that is something most of the compacts don't do. But what it would allow is it would allow states the opportunity to not only have your traditional in-state licenses, it would also have the ability for states to issue a multi-state license. And so from our perspective right now, we have about 8,288 social workers that we license, and about 22% of those individuals live out of state. So with this change, with the compact, if it becomes active and things change, we can expect that we will be losing some of our licensees in terms of our license count because those individuals will likely pursue a multi-state license where they live. So some of the benefits to social workers in Kansas and other states is that they will no longer need to have a license in every different state they want to practice. As long as their states join the multi-state compact, they'll be able to get one multi-state license where they live, and then be able to practice in all compact states. If their states don't join the compact, they would still need to get a license in those states to practice under the compact, but that's kind of one of the major differences. Some of the other compacts that we've talked about in the past, the one for psychology, the one for professional counseling, those don't give full licensure like this one would do. So basically now it is with the governor's office, and I fully expect the governor to sign it into law sometime in the near future. When we were going through that process, one of the important things for us with it changing licensure was we made efforts to try to have that compact be set up appropriately. We informed the committee when it went through the House side that we wanted to pull social workers to gauge the level of interest of people moving from a single state license to a multi-state license. And the original draft of the bill would have provided the BSRB essentially a cap for each different type of multi-state license, because the compact would allow a multi-state license to be offered for bachelor's social worker, master's social workers, or clinical social workers. And so essentially these would be treated like separate licenses under the BSRB. They each would have had a cap in that bill, and then if the bill passed, the BSRB would have been able to have discussions, and the board would have been able to gauge the level of interest, look at the lost revenue from losing those individuals that are currently licensed that live out of state, and then the board would have had the ability to set the appropriate amount under the cap. Unfortunately, the House committee did change that language and removed the references to caps to instead have a one cap of a $25 privilege to practice under that multi-state compact. What that functionally would mean is that if somebody wanted to practice under the compact in Kansas, they would still need to have a permanent license, either as a bachelor's social worker, master's social worker, or clinical social worker. But then the ability to practice under the compact into all those different states would only be for $25 more. And for some of you that have been licensed in lots of different states, if that sounds too good to be true, it's probably because it is too good to be true. With this compact being enacted, there are some new responsibilities for the BSRB. There is also some language in the bill that would require anyone practicing under the compact to have a background check. And so that is another functional thing that we'll be working with. But the legislature also wanted to make not only the people with the compact privilege get a background check, they wanted all social workers to have a background check as well as a condition of licensure. So that is something that we'll be working with as this compact is being implemented. The rules of the compact are that you have to have a certain number of states pass the compact for the compact commission to begin to meet. And I fully expect this spring that number will be reached. I think it's either 7 or 9. And then once the compact commission can start meeting, they can start working on the rules. There will likely be a data system of keeping track of everybody who has a multi-state license nationwide. That way, individuals from the public will be able to verify if this person is truly authorized to practice in the state, either because of a license or multi-state license authority from a different compact state. So I can't really give you a time frame, but the next step logically is for the governor to sign the bill into law, which I do expect will happen. And then we'll have to work with the compact commission to flush out all the rules. And then once the data system is set up, ultimately that date in the future for the compact to become live will be something that we'll be looking forward to. But I can't give you a specific time frame right now when that will likely happen. Based on the other compacts, once they have had enough members pass and the compact commissions have started to meet, it could be potentially a year after the compact is fully passed by enough states for the commission to meet. It could be less time in this case, potentially if some of those efficiencies have been learned based on the past compact. But we'll be tracking that and be able to provide information to all of you. I mentioned that $25 fee may sound too good to be true. I think what will likely need to happen is once we see the number of individuals interested in moving from a single state license to a multi-state license, we'll be able to better gauge the impact of this. When that bill was going through the legislative process, we did attempt to set the amount at $35 as a cap rather than $25. And the reason for that is because based on our poll of social workers and the percentage level of interest for those different groups, $25 cap would have only made up $100,000 of the $150,000 that we are projected to lose. So with that $25 amount, if the numbers hold true, And then we were probably expecting to see a decrease in revenue of about $50,000 every 2-year licensure cycle for our social workers. We hope that does not occur, but that is what the projections they show based on the numbers. So, but again,
David.
about the compact, and yeah, happy to answer some questions. So Cynthia, you have a question?
Yeah, so what will, if that holds, that $25 that they capped, then eventually we'll have to raise rates for everybody to make up those deficits, right?
I think that is one of the unfortunate things that, unless the legislature would go back and fix this for the compact licensees, then I think the only other choice the board would have would be to evaluate all social workers together. Our efforts when we went in front of committees were basically to say, this is a separate license than your traditional license, and so if there are individuals who want to practice using this new ability to practice in all these states, we want to be able to set the amount for those individuals appropriately to make up for what the costs are going to be operationally. But if that cap is too low, I think, yes, what you said is correct. I think if the cap is too low for the multi-state, then all we would be able to do is charge the $25. And then if we're still seeing a decrease in revenue, ultimately, when our fee fund balance comes down, we will have no choice but to look at raising fees to kind of balance that out. And just kind of as a reminder to all of you, the board really aggressively lowered fees back in 2019. They decreased a lot of the application fees and the license renewal fees by $50 each. And at that time, they did that knowing that that was not going to last forever. That was done with the intention to draw down the balance in the BSRB fee fund. And since that time, it has come down from 2.3 million down to 1.9 million today. And so any further decreases in revenue is really just going to speed up the time frame to when we will have to consider raising fees again to balance out revenue and expenditures.
Was that cited when I know you lobbied and testified? Were you able to make that point with them when they decided to drop it to the 25?
I did, and I attempted to kind of clarify that. I think there was some information out there that was not the same information that I was providing, and I think could have been misleading to certain people, and that's unfortunate. We've gone in front of the committees. We've been very transparent. We did the poll of all of the social workers and kind of had those numbers as well. And we have our information as far as how much we have in our current BSRB fee fund balance too. Our main thing in front of that committee was not to say we want to make things too high for anyone in particular. We just want to set these things appropriately when we put them in place. And we don't want to have to go back just in a few years and have to fix this. And unfortunately, we were not able to put that into place.
And one other question, did they get it into the bill that all social workers now will have to have a background check, multi-state or just an in-state license?
Yes, I believe the new language that deals with the fingerprinting and background checks extends not only to individuals practicing under the compact, but also to other social workers in the state. So
is that at initial licensure only, or does it have to be at renewal as well?
So it's not every renewal. And I don't know, there is some other language that was put into that section that essentially allows the board some authority to optionally make it a requirement every 5 years. But that I think is optional. So I am unsure at this point how it will be handled for individuals who are already currently licensed that don't want to practice under the compact. But I think that this will be a requirement at some point of individuals who will need to have this background check as a requirement. I don't think it'll be something where you'll need to see people get the background check every time they do a renewal in the future. But I do think we will probably have to have the social workers in the state have this background check based on that language that was added by the committees. This was not something that the BSRB had pursued. Most of the other compacts have just said if individuals want to practice under the compact, they would have to have a background check. But the committee went ahead and decided that this is something that they felt was important, so they went ahead and put that language in. But even though the compact was not put in the way that we had hoped that it would go in, and it does seem like the issue with the fee is going to be problematic, I think the important thing right now is just to move forward at the moment The BSRB was a big proponent of this compact. We want to be a good member of the compact once the compact committee starts meeting. And so looking forward to being able to help social workers who want to practice in different states. Like I said, there will be some additional responsibilities for the BSRB. One of those is that we not only oversee licensing for individuals under the compact, we also oversee investigations against people that are practicing and providing services into Kansas. And one of these things that the compact will do, it will not just provide telehealth services, the ability for people to do telehealth services in other compact states. It will also allow anyone who's in a compact state the ability to provide telehealth services into Kansas. And so for those individuals that are providing services that may be licensed in another state, we will now be responsible for all those additional people providing services into Kansas in terms of those investigations and complaints. So we hope that there is not a significant increase in the complaints. We know that there will likely be some additional items for our investigators to evaluate based on the background checks. We think when we go through those reports, we're going to find additional information. There will be some additional staff time also processing those background checks. A lot of that will be done by KBI, but we'll need to have staff review those and check those as well. So some steps to move forward, but we're excited about the compact, just knowing that we'll need to make a future request for a change or figure out a different approach in terms of dealing with some of those issues. So. Another bill that passed the legislature this year was Senate Bill 307, and that had to do with the Kansas Fights Addiction Grant Review Board. Some of you may be familiar with that bill. It passed, I believe, back in 2021 originally, and it set up a board of individuals to be able to approve and issue grants for addiction services provided by entities that were nonprofit. And the money for that group came from federal lawsuits in terms of pharmaceuticals. And so that group has been meeting. There was a bill that came through, like I said, Senate Bill 307, that basically would add for-profit entities to the definition of eligible entities that could claim those grants. So that did pass the chamber. It was approved by the governor back on March 22nd, 2024. Another item I'll just comment on briefly has to do with the BSRB budget. When the budget goes through the legislature every year, there is a limitation on yearly expenditures, and we submit this in our budget request in September of every year. We don't receive any money from the state for operations. We function based on the licensing revenue that we receive, and then based on that revenue, we try to seek an appropriate limitation on our balance for the year, even if we have additional money in the fund. And the House and the Senate evaluate this separately. And then basically what the House and the Senate do is they create their own budget bills, and those go before each chamber floor. And then they come together on items of difference, have one big budget bill for the state, and then pass that. And usually there's kind of a smaller cleanup bill at the very end of session. So this year, when they were going through the items for the budget, the Senate reviewed the BSRB's budget request. They were very complimentary of the agency in terms of the actions the board has taken to lower the balance in our fee fund. They did look at that amount and saw that it had been going down and was projected to decrease further. And they were very complimentary of the actions of the board. The House reviewed the items for the BSRB budget. They noted at that time that the balance in the fee fund was higher than the yearly expenditures. The yearly expenditures for the BSRB are about 1.2 million. And at that time, our budget was a little over 2 million in terms of how much was in the fee fund at that time. We did the budget committee hearings. And so one of the recommendations they made was for a report back, basically looking at ways the board could consider lowering fees further and evaluating other factors along with that. So the board did have a special meeting in February. And for that purpose, they reviewed information. They looked at past fee decreases, the current balance in the fund, the trajectory. They also collected some information on fees in other states to try to look to see if Kansas had fees that were higher than other states. Based on the 7 professions that we oversee and our efforts to collect all that information in a short period of time, we provided a little information that we could, but wanted more time to verify some of those totals. So what the board did is the board looked back in 2019, I mentioned that there were those aggressive fee decreases of $50 each for the application fees and the renewal fees. At that time, there was not a decrease in the renewal fee for the behavior analyst or the assistant behavior analyst. So at that special board meeting, the board recommended a decrease of $50 in the renewal fees for both of those groups, which would be consistent with the other groups. They noted that there were a number of items going through the legislature that could impact further the revenue of the agency, such as the Social Work Multi-State Compact and other compacts that have been passed recently, and wanted to review the impact of those and to see how they would affect revenue for the agency as well. And then they also said they wanted to collect more information on fees in other states to be able to appropriately look to see what fees, if any, should be further decreased. The board also expressed some concern that if there were other significant fee decreases, it would just lead to the board having to ultimately raise fees at a faster timetable. Because right now, those fee decreases back in 19 put the board on a trajectory to needing to raise fees again at some point to balance out revenue and expenditures. So if they lower fees in an additional amount right now, it just means it'll be a faster time frame before the board will need to raise fees in the future. So ultimately, the board did put a report together, and that was submitted back to the committee. And the board intends to further look at the budget in the July board meeting and also the September board meeting. There was also an item that when it went through the conference committees that was a little bit confusing. There was a proviso that was attached to the BSRB budget that would have prohibited the BSRB from enforcing the in-residence requirement for social work schools for applicants from social work education programs. And I believe there was a lot of misunderstanding about that item. When I heard that that item had been attached in the Appropriations Committee, I reached out to the leadership of that committee and also the individual who made that motion. And I believe that there might have been some misinformation about that or possibly some confusion. And so when the Appropriations Committee worked the bill on the floor, the maker of that motion made a different motion to remove that item from the budget. So that was not in the version that passed the House floor, and it didn't come up again through the process. And currently where we're at right now is the House and Senate were able to pass an appropriations bill before they left for about a 2-week break. So they did pass a general appropriations bill, and now they're going to come back in a couple weeks, take care of any potential veto overrides, and then look at any other items for the remainder of the session. So, but I know that I did get some questions about that item. And I think part of that discussion might tie into sort of another topic. We are in the process right now of making some changes to our regulations. That process is lengthy, but we've been having these items go through for some time now, and they're approaching the finish line. We had a 60-day time for public comment open on these proposed changes to regulations. We also had a public meeting here at the board office for any additional comment. One of the items in that bill, so for individuals who receive their education from a non-accredited program, historically, the language said if you attended an accredited program, we could move you through that process fairly easily. If you attended a non-accredited program, the current language says that you would need to have half of your coursework, at least for social work, while physically present at the school in front of core faculty. However, we were able to address this issue for individuals that are in candidacy for accreditation. We talked a lot last year about CSWE. The accrediting body can take 3 to 4 years to accredit a program. So for the individuals who receive their education from a school that is in candidacy for accreditation, those individuals would not have to meet the in-residence requirement. Those individuals we could approve for the test. And then if they pass the test, they could get a temporary candidacy license until their school became accredited, then they can get a permanent license. So really, the change in the regulation would only affect a very small number of people from truly unaccredited programs. And what the board was doing in this change was not to add anything that would make it more restrictive. What the board was doing was opening this up to modify the definition of in-resident so that it could be met not only in person, but also remotely face-to-face by screen by synchronous video conferencing. And that was done with intention, knowing that a lot of programs are moving online. And so with this new change, individuals could meet that component from online programs, even if there was no physical location for the school. So I've done a lot of work talking to people, trying to clarify that language. And I know some of the history can be a little confusing. So I've put in some time talking to various members of the legislature. We went in front of a committee, the Joint Committee on Administrative Rules and Regulations, trying to clarify that as well. Just trying to let them know, the board is very receptive to a lot of the conversation right now about workforce and challenges and things changing, and just in the terms of workplace environment, but people taking school programs online and different things like that. So the board is really trying to make these things more open, as long as it doesn't endanger the public protection mission of the board. So these changes are very positive. The next step for these regulation changes is that the next full board meeting will be in May, and I believe it's the second Monday in May. And at that time, the board will have the opportunity to do a roll call vote to formally adopt these regulation changes. If that occurs, they'll be published in the Kansas Register. And then about 10 or 15 days after that occurs, they will be fully public. And what we've done in the past is when we've had big regulation changes like this, we've sent a message out to all licensees to inform them about the changes, and we plan to do that as well. So we are approaching that finish line. We're not quite there, but we're probably about maybe 2 months or a month and a half away from that date. So looking forward to having those real positive changes put into place. The only other item I'll kind of comment on briefly is I do try to provide some updates from past board meetings for all of you so that you are connected with the actions of the board a little bit more in that regard too. I mentioned the special board meeting the board had in February. There was also a board meeting on March 11th, and just a few highlights from that meeting. We are in the final stages with an agreement with a company called CE Broker. This company is a company that partners with different state licensing boards and provides an opportunity for people to sign up for an account and then be able to upload the documentation of their continuing education. So if they are selected for audit, the information is all right there. They're also able to categorize it in certain ways, so you could mark certain hours for ethics and then certain hours for diagnosis and treatment if you need to do that. But then when you're pulled for audit, the BSRB can log into the portal and verify it. There's also something when you renew your license that will look to see, have you uploaded all of your hours into CE Broker? Now, if you choose not to utilize it, then you can bypass that and go ahead and renew. And then if you're selected for audit, you can still send your information in the traditional way. But we think for a lot of people, this will be a nice, helpful tool for being able to keep track of those records, and also for the audit process to go much more smoothly than you having to physically mail in your documents to the BSRB office or get them to us in a different way. So as I mentioned, we have worked on a data sharing agreement. We've also worked with the master service agreement. There's just some terms we still need to have some more discussions about, but I think we're close to having an agreement with that. Additionally, the board has had a conversation about background checks for licensees. We received authority back in 2016 to require background checks as a condition of licensure for all licensees, but after that point, the board did not step forward after that to make it a requirement. And there have been discussions about the pros and cons of requiring a background check at licensure, but currently right now, with the state joining 2 of the multi-state compacts, and I think we're likely to join the social work multi-state compact if the governor signs that into law, then we would have certain groups of people required to have a background check because of the compacts. There is a larger question for the board of, should the other individuals be required to get a background check as a condition of licensure as well, or should we just be looking at the individuals who are required to do so under the compact? So that's something the board is having discussions on. Additionally, the board at the last meeting in March had a presentation by a company called Acela. Last year, there was a bill that passed that was to create a unified license verification portal for all the professional licenses in the state of Kansas. As part of that, the state was able to reach an agreement with Acela to offer new licensing systems for any agencies that wanted to move under that direction. It's not a free service, there would be a cost, but for any of them that would want to move under that, Acela would have an enterprise licensing system available for anyone to move under. So the board has received information. I've been studying some of the options under this Acela platform as well, and the board will have some further conversation on whether it'd be a good idea to move under that platform. Additionally, there were some items to help with speed of license reviews. The board did do a delegation motion for staff. There are some cases where individuals are applying for license where practicum references are unavailable because a person attended their school several years in the past, and either the practicum reference is deceased or it has just been so many years the person cannot be located. So in the past, what we've had to do is hold these cases, have the board review them, and then the board would make the decision about moving forward. The board delegated authority to the BSRB staff that if we are in this position and that scenario does occur, we are able to move these individuals move forward more quickly with these individuals not have to hold them for official board review. They did delegate that authority to the staff. The board also had a conversation on jurisprudence examination, and a lot of the advisory committees are going to be picking up that conversation. Jurisprudence examinations are a way that some states test licensees to make sure that they are aware and familiar with the laws of the different states. So that is something to be mindful of, and have a good conversation about if that's something that Kansas should pursue, or if so, how best we could approach that topic. And then every year the board attempts to have an out-of-town planning meeting. It's sort of an all-day planning meeting where the board comes together and has conversations on topics that require in-depth discussion. This year, we have gone ahead and set the date for that meeting as Monday, September 30th, 2024. We have not selected the location for that meeting, but we are tentatively looking at maybe holding it in Lawrence, Kansas. We like to move that meeting around the state. 2 years ago, it was in Kansas City. Last year, it was in Wichita. So this year in Lawrence would still be central to a lot of the board members, but it would keep that meeting moving. This meeting is an open meeting, so even though it's generally not one that we can broadcast based on the resources of the facilities that we use for that meeting, it is open to the public. We had members come to the meeting last year in Wichita. So if any individuals want to attend that meeting, just keep an eye on the website. We'll have more information as we start getting the details locked in for that. And so you can see the address once we have that all determined. So with that, I will go ahead and end my report and see if there's any questions.
David,
Oh.
go ahead.
Oh,
Go ahead.
I just had a question on the background checks. So if an organization like mine, the Community Mental Health Center, is already requiring that for employment, will that waive the one that has to be done through BSRB if shown proof, or will we just be doing another one?
So I think, and I don't know for sure, but it sounds like in working with KBI, there would need to be a separate background check.
Okay.
The board did ask if there was a way that potentially the information could be shared, but that is unfortunately illegal. So we wouldn't be able to share the information from other background checks that are done. And I still need to work out a lot of the logistics with the KBI in terms of how this could be implemented, and try to figure out a date for how best we can move forward. This all assumes, of course, that the social work compact is signed into law, but when that does occur, there's still a lot of logistics to work through, but it doesn't, I don't think there's any language in there that would allow us to waive it if someone else had a background check for another purpose.
Okay, thank
David, I wanted to ask you to share the idea of the jurisprudence exam. You know, every licensee, when they apply, has to say that they have read and understand and agree to all of the regulations, et cetera. But of course, we know probably many don't actually go through that bit by bit. And that's the idea of the possible jurisprudence exam. But David, I thought you had a great idea about how we might make that less of an exam and more of a exposure, if you will, that that we might be able to adopt. I wondered if you'd share that with the committee.
Yeah, I could do that. I do know we have the jurisprudence examination as a topic under new business, so I didn't know if you wanted me to kind of get into that.
Oh, okay. All right. We can wait till then. We
Okay.
can wait till then. I
Be-
forgot that was under there. Yeah. Okay, thanks. Any other questions or comments? Thank you, David. It was a busy legislative season, and it's not completely over because they're coming back in 3 weeks and bundling things, and so there still could be some things that get pulled out and passed that we don't know about yet, but hopefully nothing too terrible. Okay, so moving on to old business, continued review of results from our survey of social workers. You all got David's report where he gave a play-by-play of the answers to all of our questions. I guess the question I have is there any action items that we need to consider as a committee, something that we want to recommend as a result of those answers to those questions? Do you we didn't talk about having those available to put up, but
Yeah, I can share my screen here. I've got a copy of the report. Yeah, last time we kind of did a high level review of the items
right.
social work survey, and I went ahead and just kind of shared my screen with page 2, which has the 14 questions that were asked as part of the survey. Some of them have been condensed just to all fit on the same page, but yeah, there was some good topics that were asked about. Some dealt with the interest in the multi-state license. Some talked about the national examination for the different levels of social work. Some talked about supervision, both those individuals providing supervision and those receiving supervision, specifically as we look at the transition between a lot of in-person supervision to a lot of individuals receiving it remotely. And then there was a question about continuing education and whether a possible change from 40 hours every 2 years to 30 hours every 2 years would negatively affect professionalism and safe practice. So kind of hit a few different topics.
So several of these are addressed by would be addressed by the multi-state compact law being passed. But one that we might want to consider is lowering, whether we want to make a recommendation to lower the number of continuing education hours. I think that the majority felt that the dropping it from 40 to 30 would not seriously impair people's ability to practice effectively and professionally.
Went ahead and
Yeah.
shared page 61 of the report that had to do with question 14, like you mentioned, the continuing education.
Mm-hmm.
And when these were licensees that were associate level social workers. I know there's only 4, but they were also invited to take the survey, and then bachelor's and master's and clinical social workers. And across the board, their answers to this question, almost 72% felt like it would not negatively affect professionalism and safe practice to decrease it from 40 to 30 hours. About 18 or 19% said that they thought it would, and then there was an additional 8 to 9% that said that they were unsure. And then 23 people just preferred not to answer this question.
So what does anybody think about whether we want to make a recommendation based on these findings? Now, I would be in favor of lowering it or recommending that it be lowered.
And also, I know as part of this conversation too, it might be helpful to kind of have just a reminder. We looked at the requirements in other states as well, in terms of what they're currently requiring for continuing education hours, and it does appear that I think the majority of states are closer to that 30-hour total than the 40-hour total.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that the survey results are definitely important to kind of hear from social workers living in Kansas, but also kind of want to remind the committee about that as well with the out of state licensing boards for social work in the other states. A lot of them have also either moved to 30 or have been at 30 for a while.
And with the multi-state, does the licensee have to follow the rules of their home state? So,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so a Kansas social worker who got a multi-state license would have to have the number of continuing education hours their state required.
That's correct.
Okay. Right. Any thoughts, opinions?
This is Eric. I'm fine with lowering it to 30 as well. I don't see the difference between 30 and 40 for CEUs to make a huge. I don't think it's going to negatively impact the profession. So I would motion that we recommend that.
I second that motion, Eric. This is Leanne.
I agree.
Okay. Good. Any other discussion or comments?
No,
We
I
have
think
a-
it's great if we do move forward because it just shows that when we send out the surveys that we are looking to listen and review what the licensees are saying.
Mhm. And I do think that it would be favorably considered by the legislature because they seem they do seem to be aware of the workforce shortage and wanting to remove barriers for licensees. So I think we would probably have a favorable reception if we recommended this. So we have a motion and a second to recommend to the full board that we lower the requirement for continuing education hours. And would this be for all levels? Because is it the same? It's the same for all levels, isn't it, David?
Yes. Mhm.
Right now. So this would be for all levels of licensure. So all in favor, aye. Any opposed? Okay, that motion carries. I'm not sure, I guess, would this be something that would have to be recommended at the beginning of the next session? Next legislative session?
So actually, the statutes for social work and continuing education state that there would be 3 hours of ethics. Then they talk about the current requirement of 6 hours in diagnosis and treatment for individuals that are at that level. The specific total of hours per 2-year license period is not in the statute. So you would be able to adjust this purely in the regulations that
It's
it
a
has.
regulation. Okay. Good. So then it would start on that whole long path you described earlier of going through the process of changing the reg. Okay.
That's right.
So, but we would it would have to be adopted by the board, the full board, and then it would go into the regulatory process. Okay.
Yeah. And there have been some discussions previously about other changes to those regulations. This could go along with those. For example, the change in language from videotapes and audio tapes to video recordings and audio recordings, and removing the self-directed learning project, basically. And so this could go in the same set of regulations as those changes.
Yeah, we had already made those recommendations, right? Okay. All right. Any other thoughts about the results of the survey or any other action you think we should consider? As I said, I think a lot of the answers were addressed by the passage of the multi-state bill, which I think the governor is expected to sign. So, okay. Other old business, a discussion on possible changes on program approval. Yes.
And so this topic has to do with review of a regulation, KAR 102-2-6. And I'll share a copy of that regulation with the proposed changes highlighted. This goes to a sort of a larger conversation the board is having about educational requirements for licensure and the different professions overseen by the board. The existing language right now states that we have statutory requirements, and then the specific program level or coursework level requirements for individuals applying for licensure are spelled out in the regulations. And so for social work, AR 102-2-6 indicates what is required for individuals when they are applying for licensure. You have the in-residence change here that we described before, removing it where it just needed to be the physical location of the institution, but it could either be in person or by face-to-face contact by synchronous video conferencing. Additionally, in this regulation, there is language. So if someone came from a program that is not accredited, this regulation includes program level requirements. And so if we had an applicant from a school that was non-accredited and also not in candidacy for accreditation, then the board would be put into a position to see, does that person's program fit the requirements here in the regulation? And it also says that either the person would come from a program accredited by CSWE. That bill now allows us to do the programs that are in candidacy for accreditation, or be in substantial compliance with the following standards. And so the task the board is put in is if someone came from a purely non-accredited school and then their program did not meet these requirements, the board would be put into a position to potentially have to deny the license application for that person. And so the board is having the advisory committees review these program level requirements for non-accredited programs to see if those are still appropriate, or if any of those are now outdated, if there's other changes that should be made to these. if there's any specific questions that members of the committee have about a specific item in this list, I'd be happy to reach out to representatives from CSWE to see if any of these program level requirements differ substantially from what CSWE would require as part of their accreditation standards. So I'd be happy to offer that as well.
This is Jane. It feels like it's just pretty straightforward. Just a minor language change and adding B to the statute. I would recommend it to move forward.
With what change, Jane?
Well, the only change that I see that was made is based on language, and that's based on removing the present at the physical location and using the video conferencing.
And I should clarify that change has been already voted on by the board as a recommended change. So it's going through the process. I just kind of wanted you to see how the new language would look with that change.
Okay.
And so right now we're kind of looking at section B here, which has to do with the program level requirements for individuals who came from programs that were not accredited. These have been in the regulation for many years, and right now, if someone applies for licensure and they attended a non-accredited program, we would essentially generally hire an expert to review these program level requirements and collect information from the student and from their school to evaluate whether their education, whether the education they received is in compliance with these regulations. So we're kind of now at a different part of the conversation, asking you to take a look at these items in section B to see are these all still appropriate, or should any of these be modified going forward?
Is this a section where it says about that the head of the program has to have a doctorate in the field? We've had a couple of cases where the head of the program had a PhD in some other related field.
Yeah.
It says holds a master's degree in social work, each program faculty member. Unless I'm on a complete different, I'm on the one that you sent, but I've got it pulled up on my computer.
Well, that's for the faculty, but for the head of the program.
Yeah, and the item that you're discussing, Cynthia, I think is being changed right now for the professional counseling for that profession, because the current language for that profession says that the person sharing or directing the program would need to have a doctorate degree in professional counseling, and that's kind of being opened up to say they would either need to have one in professional counseling or a related field. And Leslie Allen, she's the assistant director and licensing manager. I believe she's still on the call. She's more familiar with sort of these regulations and some of the location of some of those requirements. So, Leslie, would you be able to kind of speak to that in terms of maybe the person sharing or directing the program for social work, if there's similar language for that profession?
I was looking at that and I apologize. I'm not, because we don't have that many people who apply from non-accredited programs. I'm not as familiar with yours. I haven't used it as much, but I don't think that they have to have a doctorate. It talks about master's level and maybe postmaster's professional experience, but I don't think they have to have a doctorate.
The head of the program doesn't?
I don't think so, no.
Okay.
I'm looking now, but I don't.
And that's consistent with ASWB?
I don't know. That would be something we need to ask.
Well, I would like to have you run that by them, David, run what we have by them and ask that question about whether anything in there is substantially not in compliance with their standards, since that's kind of how these were originally constructed, to substantially satisfy the same standards that an accredited program would have.
Yeah, it looks like in section C, C3, it talks about the program shall have a designated director whose educational credentials include either a bachelor or graduate degree in social work and who holds a full-time appointment in the educational institution. And then it talks about a little bit more requirements for faculty members and things like that. But I think that would probably be the most similar reference to the person directing the program.
Yeah.
Well, I would be surprised if the ASWB standard would allow a bachelor's level person to be the director of a social work education program.
Something else as you're looking at this is the regulation that I brought up. So it has a lot of requirements for the program, and the university, of course, has to be accredited, regionally accredited. But yours does not have any. It just says that it has to have social work coursework. It doesn't have any specified number or content, areas or anything regarding coursework. And I thought that might be something you'd want to look at.
Right, because some of the other professions have very specific
Yes.
course requirements for
Right.
anyone who graduates from a non-accredited school.
Right, exactly.
So, and I wonder again if the ASWB standards would give us kind of an outline for how we might want to be more specific.
And Cynthia, you're talking about the CSWE accreditation standards, correct?
Yes, I'm sorry, I misspoke. I said ASWB, but yes, CS.
We have a lot of
acronyms. A lot of acronyms. So would you be able to consult with them, David, and maybe bring that back to us at our next meeting?
I could try to do that. Yeah, to see if there's any specific program coursework level requirement, and I'll ask them about the person chairing or directing the program to see if there's specific requirement for that person's education as well.
Yeah, just if they could just kind of tell us overall if any of these, if what we have here is substantially in compliance, or if not, where would it need to be added to or changes made to match what their current requirements are, or match it more closely. It says substantially, so I don't know how clearly that's ever been defined. What's substantial compliance? I think we've had to do some case by case assessment on that, right, Leslie?
Yes.
Yeah.
And some of the other professions don't have that same language. It just says the program shall meet the following requirements. So then if they have even one that does not, then you're kind of put in a position, well, they're not meeting those requirements. This at least has a little bit more flexible language to be in substantial compliance. So
yeah, and I personally would want to retain some flexibility, but there might be some parts of this that need to be altered or improved.
mm-hmm.
Anybody else have any thoughts or opinions about that, or shall we wait and see what CSWE says?
I recommend we wait.
Okay. All right. We'll look for that report at our next meeting, David.
Sure.
And moving on to new business, advisory committee membership. We have a couple of you that are I think are aging out, having served the 8 years. And so we are going to have some vacancies on the committee. And David, can you refresh us about what the rules are about non-board members versus board members, committee members for this advisory committee?
Yes. So the advisory committee policy states that who can be a member of the advisory committee. And it says the board member or board members of that profession would be on the advisory committee. There would also be a public board member. And then the remaining members of the advisory committee that are full voting members would be 10, no fewer than 3 and no more than 10 non-board members on the committee. And so currently, right now, there are 9 non-board members on the committee. And there were 5 people who were coming upon the end of their term at the end of June 2024. 2 of those individuals are reaching the maximum length of service, and that's Angie Hiller-Workman and Jane Holt-Richter. So their last meeting will be in June of 2024. But we had 3 other members who were eligible to be reappointed, and they are all 3 seeking reappointment. So ultimately, the chair of the board has the authority to reappoint members, but those have been forwarded to the chair of the board and are likely to be reappointed at this next meeting. So what this means is that since there's currently 9 non-board members and 2 members are reaching their maximum length of service at the end of June, that means that there would be 7 non-board members at the end of June. So that is above the 3 that you would need to have as a minimum, but potentially you could add as many as 3 new members to the advisory committee if you were interested in doing so. And the advisory committee policy does talk about the importance of staggering having members added to the committee, so that way everyone doesn't come up on the length of their service at the same time. So in the past, what we've done with the advisory committees is we've reached out to them about this time of year and said, if you're interested in us doing so, we can send a message to all licensees, seeing if they're interested in nominating themselves for consideration by the advisory committee. And they do so by sending us a letter of interest and a resume or CV. And then we collect that, share that information with the members of the advisory committee. And then at a future meeting, you'd be able to discuss the candidates and then mention which one stood out to you the most, or try to narrow that down. And ultimately, you can make recommendations on new members for the advisory committee. And then those names would be forwarded to the chair of the board, and she would have the authority to appoint new members to the advisory committee.
So I would like for us to have the full contingent. I think the more voices we have on this committee and the broader cross section of social workers coming from different field areas of the field, the better. So I would be in favor of having you send that letter out that goes out to all licensed social workers.
It does.
In the state? Okay.
With a permanent license, and the advisory committee policy does say one of the factors to look at is try to have diverse representation across levels of licensing.
So all 3 levels, yes.
Or 4.
Or 4, sorry. Oh, we're still including associate.
Correct. We only have 4 associate level social workers, so odds are it's possible that no one may apply from that group, but we do still have them as a permanent level of license.
And David, you may have mentioned this already for the letter that goes out. I think last time we were also looking to have a good mix of rural and
Yes.
is that something that is, will we have a form that people fill out when they're interested to mark their level of licensure and some other questions that we can look at?
Well, if they send their resume, that will probably be on there.
Yeah, so generally, so the advisory committee policy does reference some different categories to look at for advisory committee membership. And I can pull up that language here. There is some language that talks about representation geographically across the state. It does talk about the level of licensure as well. So yeah, it says, in reviewing nominations, the committee should work to ensure there is diverse representation, including but not limited to geographic setting, gender, culture, and ethnicity. Members should provide representation of the levels of licensing for that discipline, and those members should be selected from among public and private practitioners and educators. And so what I could do is I could use some of that language and then ask that to allow the members of the advisory committee to consider your unique qualifications. If you could share any information about those factors, that would be helpful, or something like that.
Yeah, that sounds like a great idea. Thank you, David.
Yeah, so does anyone disagree about that path of sending out a letter and soliciting new members for the committee? Hearing none, let's move forward with that plan. Next on our new business agenda is the discussion on the jurisprudence exam. So now you could share your idea about how we might do that, David.
Okay, great. Well, so like I mentioned, the board has had a conversation about jurisprudence examinations and the value of those examinations. You know, we want to be good partners in terms of helping licensees have few violations and few complaints. Knowing the nature of the job, and for some of these individuals, you know, you can't prevent anyone from filing a complaint, but you can be taking care of your own responsibility to know the laws, to know the unprofessional conduct expectations of professionals. And in certain states, what jurisprudence examinations, the function that they serve is to make sure that individual licensees have shown that they are familiar and are knowledgeable about different things for that state. Kansas does not currently require a jurisprudence examination for the different 7 professions under the BSRB, but some board members recently have had conversations about, well, these could be helpful, and potentially it could reduce the number of complaints or violations that we would need to investigate. But also, you know, in terms of our mission to protect the public, we would want our licensees to be knowledgeable about what's expected of them as a licensee in Kansas. And so we've done some research to look to see what models are used in different states. There are certain states that do require it as a condition of licensure, especially from people who come in who are licensed from out of state. Some of those states have companies essentially set up just to do the jurisprudence examination for them. And so we saw some that essentially you pay a fee to that company, you take the jurisprudence examination, and if you score well enough, the board has reported your score, and then that is something you need to make sure that you get licensed. Other ones are set up so that essentially you have a company that they would contract with the board to develop something that's more of a learning tool, and you would have to do a certain number of questions, and if you would get those questions wrong, then you would get replacement questions, and you would have to go through it long enough until you showed that you had you were knowledgeable to meet the standard for the jurisprudence examination. I think looking at those models, there are pros and cons, but I think right now, even though there is a tremendous value I see in the jurisprudence examination, I think it would be challenging to have something be an additional requirement of licensure, even though I can see a real value in having something like this. So I've really been wrestling with this and trying to think creatively, and I had something that proposal that I wanted to kind of talk to you about today as an alternative solution for this. So one thing that potentially the BSRB could do as a service to licensees and as a way to make sure that we're helping licensees know this information is that potentially, instead of making it a requirement for a fee, we could offer this as something for free, potentially through a service that would allow us to do this almost in a webinar type format, where people could sign up voluntarily, and we would host this maybe quarterly, and we would spend about an hour going through the same types of questions that licensees would need to understand and know. And there are some services that we can contract with that would allow individuals to essentially provide responses to this type of a format over the course of, let's say, an hour. And then one of the incentives that we could offer as a way to help people do this jurisprudence exam would be to offer it as a 1 hour of continuing education for free and in ethics. And we would be able to essentially have people log in with their name, their license number, and then track their attendance as they go through by answering these questions. So we kind of wanted to, I wanted to bring this to you today as an alternate type solution. Instead of making it a requirement, charging a fee, take a reverse approach and offer it as something maybe the BSRB could put together to help licensees, but also make sure that they are knowledgeable about these areas. And then perhaps the incentive of a free hour of CE would be something that would motivate people to go ahead and sign up for it. And like I said, the model we were kind of looking at potentially was maybe doing it quarterly, promoting it and then tracking it that way. And I've mentioned this to a couple other advisory committees, and there's been some positive comments. One even asked potentially could students voluntarily do this, and I thought that was a really good idea. And potentially we could have a way where people could note that, maybe what school they're from, and then be able to report that to the school so that the professors at that school would know that their students were trying to learn this information in advance, which I think helps everyone out. Um, so I'll pause now and see, do you have any thoughts about a jurisprudence examination in general, or potentially this alternate proposal in terms of having a jurisprudence examination in Kansas?
I love the idea of a carrot instead of a stick, and certainly would be less work to put together a quarterly sort of game format like that, as opposed to requiring everyone to take it and having to administer it and collect the fee and all of that. And I think absolutely the free CE would be an incentive.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I agree with that. I think I like the CEU idea probably better than the exam. I think more people will get interested in it, or not feel like it's, something that's a hindrance to licensure, those kind of things. And that's one of the things we want to avoid, is something that would hinder more people, or, make it where it's harder for people to enter the field. So I really like the CEU idea.
Any other thoughts? David, what would it take for, is this something that the board would have to decide on? So would our committee just be in the position of recommending to the board that this idea be pursued?
Yeah, I think that would be helpful. Yeah, I think probably this would be an item for the full board to kind of have a discussion on and move forward on. A couple of the items I would throw out for additional thoughts too. If the board did want to move forward on this, but one thing that I think I could use a little assistance would be putting together some of those questions. I know I can work with our investigators to kind of highlight some of the unprofessional conduct areas, but if there's other areas, might be able to use some assistance from some of you in terms of writing some of those questions. Especially if we're doing it quarterly, we want to make sure that we have good new questions and incentivize people to do this more than once. And then also with the compact, now that you have out-of-state individuals that would have the ability to do a multi-state license, they are no longer required to get continuing education hours in Kansas if they have this multi-state license. So while we see it as a real benefit, and I think it would be a good motivator to be able to offer a free hour of CE for our licensees, for the individuals who may want to practice into Kansas using a multi-state license, they don't need our continuing education hours anymore. But it would be nice to provide an incentive for them potentially somewhere in the future so that they would be knowledgeable about the laws in Kansas as well. So that's something we're kind of wrestling with, trying to figure out how to incentivize it for those individuals as well.
Yeah, that was not part of the multi-state compact, the structure of it, that however many other states you might be authorized to practice in, you would be required to take, prove your competency in their regulations. But you have to state that you will abide by the regulations of those other states that you would be allowed to practice in. If right now, I think Kansas was the 5th state to pass the multi-state, and I believe it's 7 states required before it goes active. So minimum, the first Kansas multi-state licensees will be able to practice in 7 states, including our own. And there's going to be more added, and trying to really know what the regulations are in all of those different states, even though you're asserting that you will follow those. I'm doubtful how much everyone's really going to study those regs from other states. So I agree this would be especially important for multi-state licensees from any of the other states that are going to be practicing in our state. This would give them an easy 1 hour exposure to our regs that would also give them a CE that they could count towards their own state's CE requirements. So I think that that's even a double benefit besides for just our Kansas social work licensees. So are we at a point where we could make that recommendation now to the larger board? That you pursue that, David, or is that premature?
No, I think that would be appropriate. You could make a recommendation along those lines if you wanted to.
Do we still have everybody on the 7 members?
Yes,
Looks like it, yes.
I think there are currently 8 individuals on the call right now. So.
This is Eric, and I would recommend that we make the recommendation for the CEU thing to the entire board. And David, on the side note, I'd be willing to help you with the questions if you want to reach out and let me know what you need.
Okay. Well, thank you, Eric.
Great. Thank you, Eric. So I'm hearing that as a motion. And do I hear a second on that point?
Okay, second.
Great. We have a couple of seconds, a second and a third. All in favor? Aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, that's great. We will recommend to the board that David pursue the idea of a quarterly CE review. I'm sorry, Jane? Oh, I'm hearing someone trying to say something.
I think we're just getting some feedback from James. So.
Oh, it was just okay. Okay, moving on to the next piece of new business. Reviewing and updating the social work supervision manual. So we've had this on our list for a while. And I think that David sent out, it's also on the website, a copy of the social work supervision manual, but we haven't really dived into it yet. I wondered if it would be, if there were 2 or 3 of us willing to get down in the weeds on that and then come back to the full committee with any recommendations about improvements or updates, if that would make more sense than having us all go through it and try and go through those points at one of these meetings. Does that sound like a reasonable way to go at that project, to have 2 or 3 of us, kind of not an official subcommittee because that would have to go through the larger board, but we could have an unofficial subcommittee that would take a first look at that and then bring their findings back to the committee. Does anybody have an opinion about that approach?
I agree.
I'm fine with a subcommittee approach. I think it would be a much better use of our time resources.
Exactly. That's what I thought too, Eric. And I'm willing to serve on that committee. Can I have 1 or 2 others that would be willing to take a look at those regs with me?
I'll take the look with you. I'm getting ready to start offering supervision anyway. Might as well take a look at it.
Okay, great. Thank you, Eric. I will communicate with you about Zooming or whatever so we can handle that. Anyone else want to take a look at the supervision manual with me and Eric? Eric and I. Okay, well.
I'd be happy to.
Okay, Robin, and who else said? Jane? Yay.
Well, I'm a little worried about doing it with me going off if we don't get it done in the time frame. So that's kind of why I was hesitating to volunteer.
Oh, sure. Okay. Well, whatever work we do on it before the end of your term, it would be great to have your participation on that. And then, if we don't actually get to bringing it back to the committee until after your term, that's okay. You will still have had that valuable input. So Eric,
Okay.
Robin, myself, and Rob, myself and Jane. Okay, great. I will communicate separately about a informal meeting after this one. And then the other thing we've had on our list for quite a while is a review and discussion on the ASWB Model Social Work Practice Act. And I think the idea was to compare it to our Practice Act here in Kansas and see where there might be mismatches or omissions or additions that we need to make. I think that's probably a bigger undertaking. Yes, David?
I was just going to say, just for clarity, we kind of used the term committee or subcommittee for the last group would look at the supervision manual. Officially, since you guys are you don't represent a majority of the committee, it would be okay to meet as just volunteers to kind of with each other, just informally, and then just kind of have some discussions and then bring it back to the committee. But just kind of wanted to clarify that if it was a formal subcommittee, it might have to go to the board, get approval, and it would take some official actions. But if you're just meeting just kind of voluntarily, that's totally fine.
Yeah, okay, that's the plan. Volunteer committee.
Yep.
And on the Social Work Practice Act, I think that's a lot bigger undertaking to review that. So is that something that we think we should do as a full committee? Maybe take a section at a time at our future meetings? Would that be a way to go at that? Then we don't all have to read the whole Practice Act before each committee meeting. We can break it up. And David, you'd be able to give us side by side a section of the Model Practice Social Work Act and the comparable section in our State Practice Act.
I can attempt to do that.
I don't know how well it matches up, but
I think that's a good idea though, to kind of see how this compares. So yeah, I will tackle that. It looks like the way the document begins, it sort of has an introduction, a note on the text of the document. The Article 1 is the title, purpose, and definition, and it's about 8 pages long. And then Article 2 is the Board of Social Work. And so that's about 10 pages long as well. So maybe just, it looks like that would just be about the first 20 pages of the document, just through Article 2. So maybe that would be good to look at for the next meeting. And I'll try to put together sort of a side-by-side and look to see if we can kind of match some of those items up.
So you'll get that out to us in the next couple of weeks so we have time to read it before our next meeting, or maybe it's better if it comes a couple weeks before the meeting because it'll get lost in our email, right?
Yeah, that'll give me a little bit more time to work on it as well. So
yeah,
I'll
exactly.
put a little reminder in there, but we'll focus on maybe pages 1 through 20 of that Model Practice Social Work Practice Act.
Okay, great. Okay, that sounds like a good plan. And then any other topics that we are burning issues that you think we need to address this year in 2024? That might be it. Go ahead, Jane.
I just want to say, over my 8 years, this committee has been mover and shakers with regulations, putting things in practice, making changes than I've been on city council, many different things that I've ever seen. So it has been really, it's been exciting to be in a group like this, to see such change and willing to make changes.
Thank you, Jane. Well, your service of 8 years is greatly appreciated. And yeah, that it is. I've also served on lots of other committees and councils, and it is frustrating to be on one where they're mostly talking happens and nothing gets done. So it is great to know that we, as a committee, can have that kind of impact by making recommendations and seeing those through and having the board, listen to us. That's really, that's a very, very positive part of the experience, isn't it?
Yes, thank you, Jane, for all of your efforts.
Oh, you're welcome. Absolutely, you're welcome. So,
Okay, let's leave the other topics for 2024 open in case anybody has something that comes up that you think we need to address or a great idea that we should consider. We'll just leave that as an open question in our future meetings. But our next meeting at this point will be on June 18th, 2024, 10 a.m. And I would like to point out that we have gotten through our entire agenda with a half hour to spare. I think that's the first time that's happened since.
Mentioned two things, Cynthia. I'm sorry.
Sure.
One of them, I think that was a great question to ask about topics for 2024 and to keep that open, because that's really what this group, as we're hearing from colleagues, bringing that information to this group so that we can see what we can do to address that. One of the things that I know has come up from colleagues is the Senate Bill 233, and not something that we need to have any, I think just having that on our radar and how that might impact social workers. So just bringing that up for just.
Which bill was that?
Senate Bill 233. And I have to do a little bit more research on it myself on where it stands, and then we'll see what happens in when break is over. But might be something that we need to reconvene and discuss. The other thing is, as we're talking about the ASWB, I know that they have kicked off a census specifically for social workers. So just want to make sure that that's on everybody's radar and that we're putting that information out so that social workers' voices can get heard and we can get a more accurate census. So I don't know, and maybe David, we could send that information out to the committee.
Yes, I'm happy to do that. Yes, that's a very good point. They are in the period right now where they're doing the census, and they would like to hear from as many social workers as possible. So I'm happy to send something about that out.
Send that out to all licensees, or were you asking just for the committee, Andrea?
Yeah, how does that work? Or I was just mentioning to the committee members, but I don't know, David, if that is possible to get out to all the social workers.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I'd be happy to do that. Just to kind of send a message to them and give them more information about that. So
how they can connect to complete that if possible. Andrea, can you elaborate on Senate Bill 233? Which one was that? What was it about?
So that one, David, you probably have more accurate information than I do.
Yeah, that one, it was this bill has changed a few times as it's gone through the session. But essentially the Legislative Research Department puts together a summary of some of these bills. The bill itself, as amended, would enact the Forbidding Abusive Child Transition Act. But what it has to do with social transitioning, and it defines a term called gender dysphoria in the bill. But the legislative research report says the bill would state that a recipient of state funds could not use those funds to provide or subsidize medication or surgery as a treatment for the child's perception of gender or sex that is inconsistent with the child's sex. Then there's some other additional items along those lines. The tricky thing is I have not seen a summary of the current version of the bill. Like I mentioned, it changed quite a few times. If you actually go to the website, there's about 6 different versions of the bill that have been posted as it went through the process. But that is the main topic that it kind of deals with. This bill was passed by the House by a vote of 82 to 39. It was passed by the Senate by a vote of 27 to 13. And it was presented to the governor for consideration on April 2nd. So the governor has not taken action on this bill yet. But if the governor does veto this bill, then essentially when the legislature comes back in a couple of weeks, they could have the option to attempt to override the veto or to do something different. But that's from a legislative perspective, that's kind of where the bill is at the current time.
I believe that the the latest version, because I get legislative updates from my legislators, included, or the one that got sent to the governor, I believe it included that there was a 10-year statute of limitations where a doctor could be prosecuted after a minor turned 18, and that the doctor would automatically lose his or her license to practice medicine if found guilty of providing such care. So it's a pretty major blow for that community. If and I would be very surprised if Governor Kelly signed it.
Right.
I don't know if the numbers by which it passed in each house, whether they have enough to override, but they'll try. So that's definitely one we need to stay aware of, Andrea, because that certainly could impact some
Right.
social work clients.
Well, and it's a hot topic because we're already seeing, these issues addressed in mental health, of course.
Yes.
And our concerns is the term doctor. Does that extend out to private practitioners and practitioners? Well, all therapists, let's just put it that way, and any person practicing under the healthcare, not just on the medical side, on the mental health side, and that is a huge issue in ethics alone.
Huge, yeah.
So I know they came to us as a chapter from the Child Advocacy Center to support it, and we just had to back away from everything on it because there's just way too much at stake on a bill like this.
Mm-hmm.
We need to keep a close eye on it as social workers.
There was another bill that was attempted. I don't think it got very far, but they were that was going to criminalize teachers using a child's preferred pronouns or a different name that they might want to be known by in school. So they're coming at it, the anti-trans thing, from many different directions, and we can hope the next legislature will not be quite as far to that side of things as the current one, but the current one isn't done. They're in their conference committee and bundling phase where they can bundle a lot of these bills together and pass them as a group, just to get them pushed through. So we'll have 3 more weeks of possible heinousness that could be coming out of our legislature that we need to keep aware of. So,
well, and I think with 8,000 plus social workers, that we have a huge voice in this.
Yes, we should. Absolutely. I don't know that any of us were consulted when these bills were written, but would have been nice if they would have consulted the people who actually work with the clients that they're targeting. So, okay, any other thoughts? Thank you for those two, Andrea, watching that bill and any others like it, and sending out information about the census, social work census, to our licensees. Anything else? If not, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Hi.
Aye. I'm betting there are none opposed. I will see you all in June, and I'll be communicating with Eric, Robin, and Jane about our informal subgroup that's going to meet.
One last note. We had already previously sent out a calendar appointment for the next advisory committee meeting for a different date, and so we have that new date there of the next meeting on June 18th at 10 a.m. So I will just modify your existing agreement or an existing appointment that should just move to the new date. So you won't see a new one; you'll just see an update for that, but it'll move to the 18th.
18th of June. Yes, I appreciate that, and that I needed that change to accommodate my not being around the earlier date. So thank you all for being willing to make that change, and I'll see you in June.
Thank you. Have a great
Have
day.
a good rest of your day.
Thank you.
Bye.